When I look back at the men I chose to love, it's clear now. I wasn't choosing with my heart. I was choosing with my trauma. I was a dismissive, avoidant attachment style woman who had no clue of what a healthy, secured attachment style of loving was. Welcome, my loves, to the Hardened and Healed Podcast. Hey loves, let's sit on down. I want to thank you again for allowing me back into your home for another episode of the Hardened and Healed Podcast. It is your girl London, your healologist, and I am here to make certain that we get to the other side. I mean, what better place to be but healed emotionally, right? Emotional illness is not spoken about enough. And that is what I'm here for, advocating for those who have emotional traumas from childhood and it is wreaking havoc over their lives. Now, this is not a gender thing. This isn't a racial thing. This is a global thing. This is a human thing. We all experience some form of childhood trauma throughout our lives. And as light as we take it, it's not always physical abuse. It's not always verbal abuse. There is a lot of emotional abuse that happens directly and indirectly. So am I saying you are a bad parent or you was raised by a bad parent? No, but what I am saying is that there are definitely some things that happen in your childhood that turned you into the person that you are today. From our decision making to what we wear, what we say, what we do, and who we choose to spend the rest of our life with. I mean, that is important. So just as we are raising awareness for mental illness, equally there should be awareness for emotional illness. It does exist. And it is a little more difficult than you think. Now, if you have not seen any of the episodes before now, you are unaware about the emotional attachment style assessment test. This is vital, you guys. It is very important that you take this test to establish who you are and how you show up in relationships. Now, as always, I am going to link it down in the description box below. And I'm also going to give you just a little brief rundown on what that test is actually requiring. It's only 5 minutes. It does not take forever, but it will be a game changer in your life. So, wait, where do you think you're going without hitting that subscribe button? And hey, you haven't even taken your attachment style assessment test. That's right. There's an assessment test for you to take, but no worries. It's only 5 minutes. I know you have 5 minutes, just like you have that 1 second to hit that subscribe button. Now, if you haven't seen the previous episodes of the Hardened and Healed podcast, where I explain what an attachment style test is, you're in luck today. It is basically a specific questionnaire that asks questions to determine whether you are secured emotionally or unsecured. Now, when I say unsecure, I don't mean insecure. There's a difference. Trust me. But knowing your emotional status is very important. Just as important as taking care of your mental health. Now, if you don't know where those tests are, no worries. I'm going to link that in the description box below. I'll put about 4 links there. You can choose one of them. Or hell, you can do them all. They all can't be wrong, right? Once you determine what your attachment style is, please be sure to comment it in the comment section. I would love to know. Hey, so get to testing and good luck. So now that we got the details of that over, let's just jump right into it. I myself was a dismissive attachment style person. And so I'm going to speak directly to my dismissives out there. You may just be finding out that that is your attachment style. And now these light bulbs are starting to go off as to what that really means. Baby, it means a lot. You heard me? You heard me? So basically what that is that sometime during childhood, and this could be very, very early on to the point that you don't remember, or somewhere during early adolescence up until about the age of 7, where there was some neglect, there was some rejection, and there was some abandonment. Now, we all experience this, but we all digest it differently, right? Some people deal with abandonment by being super clingy and being insecure and anxious and just full of emotions and very expressive because of the anguish they feel when they feel alone. They also experience a lot of unsettling when it comes to rejection. It makes them second guess themselves or figure out where they went wrong or try to be a different person. But for the dismissive avoidant, this is the completely opposite. In fact, what a dismissive avoidant will do is create their own abandonment. They will abandon a situation before it abandons them. They will abandon a partner, a job, a friendship, you name it, they're out of there. And they do this because it is a void of emotions. Once abandonment starts to trigger them, or even rejection, their emotions shut off. Why do I know this? Because I was her. I was definitely a void of emotions. So there were, I would say, relationships that I entered, both intimate and platonic, that did not have my heart, right? They had my time, they had my commitment, but they did not have my heart. And you may say, well, that's not necessarily important. It isn't unless you want to connect. When you're trying to connect to someone and the emotion is missing, the opposite partner knows. They can't put their finger on it or don't have a way to describe it, but they are very aware that there is a disconnect. So this may be plaguing you in your more intimate relationships. It did for me, at least, all through high school, my young adulthood, my 20s, my 30s. I struggled with a deeper connection. I couldn't understand why I would show up, I would show out, I would be loyal, I would be faithful, I would be committed. And the men, for some reason, it just was standoffish. And that was because in the center of me, there was a coldness. There was a child that had been wounded by rejection, had been wounded by abandonment, and had been wounded by neglect. Now, these show up in everybody's lives differently. So abandonment doesn't necessarily mean that I was left on a doorstep, because I wasn't. Rejection doesn't mean that every time I asked something, I got denied. And neglect doesn't mean that I wasn't responsibly taken care of. But in all of these areas, there was some lapse, whether there was lapse in judgment of my caretaker, or whoever my caretaker may have assigned to take care of me in that moment. This is where a lot of the other pitfalls happen. This is where other forms of abuse usually can tap in. Being a dismissive avoidant, though, makes that a little bit more, I would say, challenging for the predators, because we don't tap in. So because we are avoiding love and affection because it was missing, when someone offers it as a way to lure us in, it doesn't connect for us. So we're not looking for somebody to, I'll change that. We are looking for someone to step in and play daddy if the daddy is there, or play mommy, but they'd have to do so much to convince us that they're here to stay. So there would be a lot of distance, a lot of jumping hoops to get us to really let down our guards. And even then, that typically doesn't happen. So sometimes when it comes to predators, and y'all know what I mean, they find us a little bit more challenging and usually don't try us as much. They realize that the vacancy that is there, we're not looking to fill, or at least it cannot be easily filled. So that works in a sense of protection. But when it comes to love and acceptance and just admiration, it ends up being a heavy gavel. It just comes crashing down in every relationship that we're in. I have a few relationships that I could specifically see where I had the potential of a good guy. And when I tell you that dismissive avoidant was kicking up, baby, she was showing out. Do you hear me? I mean, right out the gate, guy couldn't do too much. There was definitely expectations, right? Because, as a dismissive, you set the bar high. You expect the same loyalty, the same trust, the same honesty. But what you don't want to reciprocate is vulnerability. Now, you want that. And even if someone expresses it, you're going to give them the rough end of the stick with that. You want them to be loving and nurturing and lovey-dovey, even though it makes you cringe on the inside, I could honestly tell you that while I probably despise the clingy man, clingy was what I needed, because I needed somebody who was gonna put their money where their mouth is. I needed somebody who's going to show up no matter how many times I push them away. But realistically, who has time for that, right? Because the biggest fear I have is rejection, and yet I'm rejecting my partner every chance I get. Because I'm having a hard time believing. I'm having a hard time not feeling worthy now, because dismissive avoidants don't feel unworthy. In fact, we feel very worthy. We almost feel entitled. Somebody did not do this at a time where it was pivotal, and so now everybody has to pay for it. We don't necessarily have low self-esteem at all, to be honest. We just don't think that people are going to meet the requirements and expectations that we set forth. And even when people begin to show it, we don't think that it's going to be long-lived. That is where the abandonment issues come in at. So, honey, how do we get to the other side? Well, first you have to identify with it, right? You have to understand that you a little standoffish. You might be an extrovert. You might be the life of the party. I was ready for a good turn up with my friends or with my family, with my peers, maybe not necessarily my partners. Now, my partners would see that I was a good turn up from a distance, which is what was so intriguing and where the interest came from to begin with. But then they would get to me and I would be rigid. I'd be tight, I'd be snippy, I'd be very short, very sarcastic. Oh my gosh. The sarcasm was just like through the roof. Sometimes I just feel like I just need to make a public apology. But anyway, so one of the things that I had to do through counseling and absolutely through prayer was to dig to the root of me. Yeah, I know. We all think we got it together. No problems. We've reached adulthood. We're good, right? We're not dramaful. We have arrived. We're mature. We're not. But in counseling, I was able to peel back a lot of the layers that made me the grouch that I was. And I'm telling you, only intimate relationships brought out this grouchiness in me. And a lot of it was just the fear of being loving and being taken advantage of. The fear of being abandoned or neglected or mistreated. It does not help dismissive avoidance to be around other friends, other peers who are very clingy or very needy or very emotional, and see them get taken advantage of. Like for us, it's like, that's it. That is exactly why I am not nice to guys. That is exactly why I am not open and easy and free. When I think about it, I realize that in all that I was protecting, it's kind of like that little saying, a closed fist, nothing comes out, but nothing gets in. It's like a closed heart, right? You don't get to love, but you also don't get to be loved, because even the love that you're receiving, you're rejecting. So for me, what I had to realize or actually identify with is that there were forms of rejection. And I had to go back to those. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to know what triggered you or what was most impactful for you in childhood, everything that you can remember. Everything that's good, everything that's bad. Because you have to think about it chronologically from birth to whatever age you presently are. A lot of things have happened. An enormous amount of things have happened. Good, bad, or indifferent. But the things that stick with you, the things that you remember, because it is impossible to remember it all, are the things that had some form of impact. So if we push aside the good things for a moment and we just take time and we spend it on the negative things, what were those things? Were you maybe teased or bullied in school? Maybe by a sibling, maybe by a cousin? Were you maybe cursed out or beaten or something by a parent or a step parent or a grandparent? Those things that impacted you negatively that you remember are the key to how to move on. Because remembering it says, okay, that's one thing that I know impacted me. 2, what about that particular thing impacted me so negatively? What would I have wanted to happen and what did happen? 3, who caused it and what was their intentions? Were they intentional or unintentional? Were they a victim of some type of childhood trauma themselves? In other words, were they passing down what was passed down to them, or was this something that they cultivated all on their own because of their own traumas? And then 4, after the impact, how did I carry it throughout life? When? And with what? And with who? Am I dressed to the T because I look like crap coming up? Do I look like crap because I came from crap? Do I take certain things more seriously than others, like maybe grooming or maybe my career or parenting? All of these things matter based on that trauma. And sometimes trauma makes us a better person, but sometimes not. And so when you take that test and you find out whether you're a dismissive avoidant, a fearful avoidant, an anxious style attachment person, it's going to connect the dots. And you're going to start having all these ahas. Like, me being a dismissive avoidant made so much sense, not only just in the relationships that I rejected and the connections that I rejected, but how I selected them to begin with, right? I selected the person who was willing to do the chase. So usually that would be an anxious style person. This person is super clingy. And because I want reassurance that you're going to be here and that you're not going to leave, what better person? But part of being a dismissive is also the isolation, the need to be self-sufficient and be on my own and be independent and operate on autopilot. Anxious style person won't allow me to do that. They want to be in every part of my day and what I have going on and what I'm doing and, whether it's good or not. And so there's going to be some strife there. So either as a dismissive avoidant, you're picking anxious style attachment people, which are the ones that blow up your phone. They show up to your job. They cry. They plead. They forgive. They don't forget, but they kind of ride you to the end. And so you pick that particular partner because no matter what, they're going to stay. They're not going anywhere. So they feed into your abandonment issues. If you tell them no, they're going to show up anyway. They feed to your rejection issues. And that even if you're not speaking, they're not going to forget a birthday or an anniversary. They're going to make sure that you have a gift. They're going to speak to your neglect issues. So an anxious attachment style person sounds perfect, right? Maybe not so much, because they are also triggering or rubbing against all the things that you need that identify you as a dismissive, right? They're rubbing against the need to be alone, the need to do it yourself, the need to stand out, the need to be isolated, the need to self-preserve. They're going to rub against what makes you you, even though it does make you an unhealthy version of you. I mean, let's just be honest. A lot of the characteristics of a dismissive avoidant aren't the most healthiest, but none of them are. So if you're not operating as a secured, attached out person, then it's safe to say that you have very toxic behaviors. And depending on who you partner with, it will multiply. So what do? You take the time to identify with those traumas, each and every one of them, because all of them have some impact in your decision making day to day. So from as simple as wearing no name brand sneakers to as big as nobody showing up to none of the plays or none of the sports that you were in. I knew a young lady at the time. She had teenagers. Well, my kids were like in elementary and middle school, but she had teenagers. And I remember her telling me, because she was a single mom, I told my kids, don't sign up for all those bunch of stuff because I work 2 jobs and I don't have time to drive them from one practice to another. And in her mind, it is what was most important was to supply and provide for them. So no, I can't be to a football practice or a cheerleading practice. No, I can't take you here or take you there. I need you to go to school, get good grades, come back home and be there when I get there. I need a clean house. I need dinner cooked. You almost become your parents' partner. If you're 12, 13, 14 years old cooking a full course meal, it's safe to say that not only are you parenting yourself, but you're parenting your parent. And I know a lot of people are going to be a little disgruntled because they didn't have a problem with that. They don't see what the big deal is. But I do think that there's an order of responsibility when it comes to childhood, adolescence, preteen, young adult, and so forth and so on. And so some responsibilities I think can be created too soon, too early. I mean, developmentally, there's just certain things as a kid you're just not going to do well. A 7-year-old is not going to wash dishes well. Now, if you are a mom of a 7-year-old and you have your child washing dishes, I'm sure you're going to beg to differ. And that's fine. Maybe you have the exception. I'm not here to argue. But I just think, and this is my own opinion, there's a lot of development that is going on, even up until the age of 7. Like, children are still forming their little personalities, their likes and their behaviors and their mannerisms. And so sometimes adult responsibility, and I do feel like when it comes to cleaning a kitchen, so yeah, you might say, well, they just do a couple of dishes, but they don't clean the kitchen. Tomato. I do think that sometimes it's the cart before the horse, because there's plenty of time for them to learn to do the dishes. By the time they hit middle school, they have a little bit more responsibility. They're on autopilot. They're operating with a little bit more responsibility and maturity. That's a perfect time to throw that in. But I'm not here to tell you how to parent your kids. I'm just saying that some of these things really impact and make a difference. We don't realize sometimes how much of our children's childhood we remove from them, making them responsible. And I don't mean the general responsibilities like cleaning up after yourself, putting your toys away, running your bath water, picking out your clothes, not things like that. But I'm talking about, if you're 15, 16 and you're paying bills in the house, that is definitely an adult responsibility. And I'm not talking about a cell phone bill or maybe car insurance if you drive. I'm talking about like the light bill, like buying groceries. And granted, parents need help these days, especially single parents. So I totally get it. Where do we draw the line? Because those little adults, young adults, children, teens, they become the dismissive, fearful, and anxious style attachment people that we now interact with. So it's not just labeled to your children, it's your coworkers. That coworker that comes in and they micromanage, chances are they were micromanaged. Or not micromanaged enough and everything went haywire because nobody was overseeing. Could you imagine coming home to a parent who's so exhausted and so tired that it doesn't matter that the house isn't clean? It doesn't matter whether you bathed or took a bath. They don't even notice that you don't have on clean clothes, or that you had the same socks on for 4 days, or that you haven't even had a home cooked meal, that maybe you've only had a bowl of cereal, if that. They didn't even realize that the lights were off until later on that evening, or that the water, or just any of those things. That would make you micromanage your life. Everything being out of order, everything being in disarray would definitely make you be very nitpicky, dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's and making sure that everything is in place. We don't connect those dots. It would also determine the partner that you choose. Maybe you end up with a partner that you clean up after. And even though you're moaning and groaning and arguing about it, it's your norm, right? You picked up after your parents. What difference would it be for you to pick up after a partner, or to pick up after your children? Or maybe you select somebody completely opposite. You select a neat freak because you were around filth or junk. Because junk and filth are two different things, right? And so sometimes people pride themselves off of being junky, but not filthy. Filthy is being surrounded by trash and debris and things that should be thrown away. Junk is being surrounded by things that are out of order or not in place or too excessive. Maybe there's too much of it. Maybe you don't need the 5th pair of black shoe because now you have no place to put it in your closet. You open your closet door and everything falls out. We're not going to talk about extra shoes though, because I'm working on that. But these things really do make a difference. So if you take the time out to find your attachment style, who or what caused it, then equally take time to look at your partner. Or if you don't have a significant other, partners that you've chosen of the past, you'll be able to see direct correlation. Like, oh my gosh, I see why this didn't work. I see why this did work. I see why I flocked to this person. I see why this person was an absolute no. But it also positions us to be better people within, right? Because now you realize that I am chewing you out for all the wrong reasons. You said something, you meant nothing about it, but you triggered me. You hit something internally, something that I have been harboring. And now I'm mad. I'm upset. I'm hurt. And it has caused this wedge between us. And to be honest, you're really not the source of my issue. My childhood trauma is. So, when you think about it, the impacts of emotional trauma are so deeply rooted that it could alter the adult that you've grown to be. You may be nothing like who you intended to be. There might have been a whole lot of hurt and pain that allowed you to morph into this cocoon of a person. And it's time to break off that shell. It's time to get up out of there, grow you some wings, get to flying, get to, you know what I'm saying? Realistically, think about the person that you are and think about the person that you want to be. This soft girl era that everybody's talking about, it exists. But I can guarantee you, at least as a Black woman, there's been a lot of suppression in that soft girl realm. Let's get to who we want to be. Let's get to who God has called us to be, right? Let's start to operate in our purpose and let's be purposeful. Now that's a thing. Let's be purposeful. We can't do that when we're suffering from trauma that is changing our identity. When we are bitter and cold and resentful and just mean and nasty. And we see it as a form of protection, but it really takes away from the character of who we really are. We don't want that. Let's get into these childhoods. Let's figure out what is going on. Your healologist is requiring this. And I'm going to give you a prescription. How about that? Let's go ahead and start with prescription number 1, which is taking that test. Right? That is mandatory. Prescription number 2 is once you have found out your attachment style. Digging in deep. Go into Google. Purchase books that have more detail about that particular attachment style. I'm telling you, you're going to probably agree with 99% of them, if not all. There's going to be a few things that might be a little bit, different, and that's okay. You don't have to hit the nail on the head, but you definitely want to get close. Then once you find out the characteristics and the traits of that attachment style, really take some time to dive into your childhood. Now for you, those of you who've had very heinous childhoods, very traumatic childhood, I would say don't do it alone. Seek counseling. Have someone walk you through it. And this is not an overnight cure. Like, I didn't just automatically stop being a dismissive avoidant. I mean, it raises its ugly head every now and again. It really does. But because I am aware of it, I can catch it and say, okay, you're acting very dismissively. And how does this help the situation that you're in? It probably doesn't. How would you like to respond in this situation? Especially when you're dealing with your partners. And I'm going to tell you now, if you are unequally yoked, if you're with a partner who equally has emotional trauma that they have not dealt with, y'all are going to be butting heads from now until the end of time, or until someone gives up and walks away. Aren't you tired of unhealthy relationships? Aren't you tired of the lack of success when it comes to the opposite sex and making it make sense? I often used to question, like, God, why are men and women so opposite and expected to make it work? It's because it can, right? When you think about a puzzle, it takes opposite pieces to create the full picture, right? This has to fit into that. So if this little cutout is matched with another cutout, they're not going to link together. The piece is not going to fit. So in order to have healthy, emotionally healthy relationships, you have to know your emotional status. You have to. And then it's up to you to work on it. So I ain't going to hold you up much longer. I mean, I heard my ride, so I know it's time to go. I appreciate you welcoming me back into your home again for another episode of the Hardened Healed Podcast. I just love visiting y'all. Y'all make me feel so warm and inviting when I'm here. But as I said, it's time to go. So you know what I'm going to say. Until next time. Bye, loves. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of the Hardened Healed Podcast, go ahead and subscribe, share with a friend, and turn on your notification button so that you don't miss an episode.